Alright, so let's take a deeper look at Henry the Orator Hunt. We already know he was involved in the Sparfields meetings of 1816, but I think that it's important you get a good grasp of his character, so I've just put together this presentation going over his life, his career, and what he believed. Because obviously you've got quotes from him, like the one I mentioned earlier, Violence Born of Despair, which looks very good in your essay, and pretty much the more you know about the period, the better you'll be able to relate the events to the question that they've asked you, and the more likely you will be to get those A's and A stars. So, who was Henry Hunt? Henry Hunt was a phenomenal orator in the 19th century, and he was a major force among working-class radicals due to his orations inspiring reformist sentiments. So basically, he spoke out loud to the working class and educated them on the reform movement, because you have to think a lot of them would be illiterate and they wouldn't be able to read the stuff being published by Henry Cobbett in his two penny trash, although it would have been affordable to them. So how are they going to get to know all of these ideas? Well, through people like Henry Hunt, standing up on pedestals, standing up on carriages, and telling them in plain English. So, he also played a significant role in the later Chartist movement, and the movement that called for the repeal of the Corn Laws. Hunt was born in 1773, so 6 years before the American Revolution, and I've put there about the Chartist movement and the Corn Laws. We briefly went over the Corn Laws. The people who opposed it, the main institution that opposed it was the Anti-Corn Law League, and that had members such as Lydia Becker. But I won't really go much into the Chartist movement at the moment, as they aren't relevant for the popular protest between 1780 and 1820. They really come up in the reform movement of the early 1830s. So, Hunt's oratory career. Hunt was drawn to politics during the Napoleonic Wars, and he gave powerful speeches in Bristol where he would denounce the policies of both the Whigs and the Tories, proclaiming himself a democratic radical. His most famous speeches were those he gave at Sparfields and Peterloo during the economic downturn which was a result of the end of the Napoleonic Wars. He played a major role in spurring on the parliamentary reform movement in the early 19th century, and he remarkably opposed Earl Grey's 1832 Great Reform Act. Do you believe it deserves the prefix great? That'll be something we get onto when we start the 1830s. He opposed it due to the fact that he believed it did not go far enough. Obviously, correlations to the 1867 and the dispute between Gladstone and Disraeli there, but I digress. Hunt's arrest. He famously shared a cell in prison with William Cobbett when he was sent to prison, and he is perceived by historians to have been one of the great reformers of the age, although he is not regarded with the same reverence as William Cobbett, as Hunt was not philosophically opposed to violent demonstrations. Nonetheless, he is regarded as a great orator who played a major role in the political movements of the day. So, Hunt's political career. He was elected as MP for Preston in 1830, where he served prior to the 1832 Great Reform Act. He argued against the 1832 Act, as it did not grant formal equality throughout the electorate. For example, it disenfranchised women, unintentionally though, might I add. And he gave speeches urging the working class solidarity, and he gave an intelligent insight into the notion that hunger was a major contributing fact to political unrest. Now, I'd take a note of that because some of the questions like to ask you what was the driving force for a lot of the popular protest at the time. So if Hunt is specifically saying it was hunger and therefore the impoverished status of much of the working class, then that probably invalidates the argument that much of the protest was spurred on by pure ideology. So that's good to know. Famous works, I usually put the books there, but since Hunt was an orator, I presumed that the speeches would essentially take their place. So his Sparfield speech, Peterloo speech, and the local speeches he made in industrial areas, personally educating the industrial working class. Hunt's core ideas can be summed up as parliamentary reform, peaceful and sometimes violent protest, redistribution of the seats. He opposed the Corn Laws. He was an advocate of annual parliaments. He opposed the combination laws, and he was a Chartist. And like I said, we'll go on to the Chartist movement and the People's Charter another time. So that is Henry Hunt.